Paula Ehrlich, and I'm going to start out today showing some slides about the Half Earth Project. Let me just click on my desktop and we'll be there. Can you see me?
We can see you, and our last classroom just made it in, so we're perfect. We're good to go.
Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. I'm wondering if any of you guys know a really famous scientist and naturalist named E.O. Wilson. He wrote a book called Half Earth last year, and here he is reading from the first paragraph of the book.
What is man? Storyteller, mythmaker, and destroyer of the living world, thinking with a gavel of reason, emotion, and religion. Lucky accidents of primate evolution during the late Pleistocene. Mind of the biosphere, magnificent in imaginative power and exploratory drive, yet yearning to be more master than steward of a declining planet. Born with the capacity to survive and evolve forever, able to render the biosphere eternal also, yet arrogant, reckless, lethally predisposed to favor self, tribe, and short-term futures, obsequious to imagined higher beings, contemptuous toward lower forms of life.
What that nice smiling man, E.O. Wilson, is really talking about there is an extraordinarily difficult problem we're facing right now, where we're losing a lot of species. We're experiencing an extinction that may be among the most deadliest threats that we've ever imposed upon ourselves. It's hard to imagine, but in the last 50 years or so, species that once were everywhere on Earth have practically disappeared. And the rate of extinction is about 1,000 times higher than at any time in our human history. And of course, we have lots of conservation organizations that are working to try to slow that loss. They've stopped it by maybe 20%, but it falls short of stabilizing our Earth's environment. And yet that biodiversity is really essential for the resilience and sustainability of our lives. And as human impact on the environment continues to grow, it really diminishes our biodiversity and compromises our resilience, our ability to kind of come back from anything that might happen. So halting that loss of biodiversity, halting the species extinction crisis turns out to be one of our greatest challenges of the 21st century. Now, in that book Ed was reading, he describes a visit to the Cincinnati Zoo. And there he met a pair of Sumatran rhinos named Emmy and Eco. Once, Sumatran rhinos ranged widely throughout southeastern Asia, but with much of its habitat replaced by agriculture, and its populations driven downward by relentless poaching, the species is now limited almost entirely to a few captives in zoos. And from 1990 to 2015, the worldwide population of Sumatran rhinos plunged to 300 and then to 100. So in a heroic effort, a veterinary team at the Cincinnati Zoo has been working to breed the few captive animals remaining, including Emmy and Eco, who were so tame that Ed could reach out and lightly touch them. And he describes this sort of uncanny spiritual connection, which is really hard to explain, but it's a feeling that lasts until today. That connection is really powerful, and I'm sure you guys have all felt it. Human beings are connected with all of life. The organisms that surround us in such extraordinary profusion have evolved over almost 3.8 billion years to create a really exquisite and careful balance that supports our lives. And we depend upon all of nature, all of what's called the biosphere, in the same way that nature depends upon us. All life and humanity are impacted by biodiversity loss, and the resulting damage could have really bad consequences for all of life, including for people. And yet, while we seem to be prone to destroying the living world, we are able to protect the rest of life. We just must act before it's too late, right? Before we've lost all these irreplaceable species and permanently degraded the balance of natural biodiversity. As E.O. Wilson says, to strive against odds on behalf of all life would be humanity at its most noble. Really powerful words. E.O. Wilson, Ed Wilson, has been hailed as the preeminent champion of biodiversity. He coined the word biophilia to describe this sort of inner affinity that we have for all other species, all other animals. And he has a theory of island biogeography that explains why all confined landscapes inevitably lose species. He's earned more than 400 scientific awards and other honors, including 2 Pulitzer Prizes. And his most urgent project is Half Earth. Half Earth is a call to action to commit half of the planet's surface to nature. So you might ask, why half? Well, the crucial factor in the life and death of a species is the amount of suitable habitat that's left to it, right? So a change in the area of a habitat results in a change in the number of species that can live on it by about the 4th root. They've actually figured that out mathematically. It's related by the 4th root. So as reserves grow in size, the diversity of life that can survive in them grows as well. And if you make that habitat smaller, the diversity within it also declines to a pretty mathematically predictable degree. Sometimes very swiftly and sometimes very immediately. And for some species, it's forever. So to give you a feel for what happens, when you take 90%, when you lose 90% of the habitat, the number of species that can persist in that habitat descends to about half. And this is what's actually happening in some places around the world, like the ones that are highlighted on this map. So if in those places, if just 10% of the rest of the habitat was then also removed, and you could probably imagine, a team of lumbermen doing that in a month, then most or all of the surviving resident species would also disappear. If on the other hand, we protect half the global surface, the fraction of species that we can protect will be about 85%. So at 1/2 and above, we sort of enter a safe zone, which is really nice. But there's something else in the Half Earth call to action too, and that's this feeling that people really need a victory, right? You want to win, and so we don't just want news that the progress is being made, but Half Earth is also about shifting the conservation movement from a process to a really inspiring goal that drives our conservations to a new level, to that new level where we know we'll be safe, right? Half. So the question then is how, right? How do we get to half? And that's where the Half Earth Project comes in. The Half Earth Project is all about trying to figure out how to fuel this moonshot that E.O. Wilson has inspired and really take care of our planet. and also how we can make caring for the rest of life, for all the other animals on the planet besides ourselves, part of really our common humanity, part of the way that we think about how we should live our lives. So I'll take a little bit of time to talk about how we get to half. The first element, the core, is research. We have to get the science right. So the Half Earth Project champions research that helps us better understand our world. We know about 2 million species, but there's another 8 million or so out there that haven't even yet been discovered. So the Half Earth Project's working on that research, supporting conservation efforts, nurturing students that want to be our future biodiversity stewards, and supporting conservation efforts everywhere. The second bucket is leadership and knowledge. The Half Earth Mapping Corps is going to help us decide what half should we protect, what should we target for conservation. And we're creating a knowledge platform that will foster a better understanding about those places and why they're important, and also helping to drive action to protect those places. So it's kind of like an Apollo mission team, right? Everybody sits in a control room with all the maps of the world spread out in front of them. And first they're looking at all the areas of the world that we have protected, which is about 15%. And then they're looking at the layers of data that will drive decision-making about what we should protect. And then they're monitoring progress towards the goal of Half Earth. And we're using boots on the ground conservation efforts as models to inspire and inform efforts to get us to that Half Earth. And using their inspiring stories to really engage, support, and provide a model for similar conservation efforts throughout the world. Tompkins Conservation, for example, are well on their way to half Argentina and half Chile. They've donated conservation lands to the Chilean and Argentine national park systems for the benefit of wildlife and people. And they're committed to this conservation strategy and have had excellent success so far. They recently completed a park that's 11 million acres, the largest private public conservation effort in history. So they've acted as catalysts, working in partnership with surrounding communities and governments. The restoration of Gorongosa National Park, which is in Mozambique in Africa, is also an amazing story. So in 1994, there was a wildlife survey where they counted only 100 elephants, 300 reed buck, 100 water buck, and a handful of small gazelles. All the other big wildlife in the park had vanished. And the Gorongosa Restoration Project worked to restore the habitat, the species, and the ecosystems, resulting in a new animal census in 2014 of 71,000 animals. So you see, it can be done. And Gorongosa is an amazing living experiment. And now many scientists say that Gorongosa is one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. The Turner family and the Turner Endangered Species Fund have also done extraordinary species restoration work. And wolves, for many reasons, are particularly close to their hearts. Team Turner has and will continue to make major contributions to wolf recovery and conservation. And the bear trap pack that inhabits Ted Turner's Flying D Ranch in Montana is one of the largest in the US and is the most notable conservation pack on private land. But engaging people in these stories is just the beginning. In order to reach a broad audience, the Half Earth Project is also creating exhibits and film and communicating and engaging through social media. And we're doing concerts that create a real transformative experience around, really to pull people together around the need, the feeling of the need to care for the rest of our planet and sort of establish a sense of community that supports the goal of Half Earth. In fact, this summer in June, Paul Simon will be doing 19 concerts across the US to support the Half Earth Project. We're also doing something called the Sounds of Silence. It's a museum exhibit which will engage people in not just what the loss of biodiversity looks like, but what it sounds like when you go out in the woods and the birds are no longer tweeting. We've established a Half Earth Council that's composed of thought leaders across a wide range of fields of expertise that are really necessary to bring the insight that we need to this and help the Half Earth Project be successful. And together, they're helping us really think about what we need to do to get to Half Earth. And hopefully each of you can find your own unique way to fold Half Earth into what you do every day. Sort of what your own dreams are about what your life could be and should be and how you'd like to care for your planet. So the Half Earth Project has science at its core and our kind of our obligation to the rest of life at its heart. And so the big question I'm sure you're all thinking is, gosh, can we really do this? Can we save half the Earth for the rest of life? And I you know what? I think it's pretty simple. We can if we want to, right? You just have to decide that we do. And as Ed says, human existence could be a paradise. It's really up to us. So I would say it's time to save the very fabric of life on Earth and raise our conservation efforts to a new level. It's time to save half the planet's surface for the immensity of life upon which we absolutely depend and which also depends upon us. So I hope you will support the Half Earth Project and be part of our global movement to conserve half the Earth for the rest of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. That was awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. And wow, what a task. It is a big task, especially with only 15% protected so far, but you're right. If we have the will, we definitely have the means to do it. So thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Well, we're going to open things up to classrooms and let them come up and ask a question if they like. So I know I can
unscreen. There we go. How do I unscreen share so that they can see me again?
You're back. We gotcha.
Okay, there we go.
All right. So I know Mrs. Fram's class was going to have to leave early, but I still see a few in the classroom. So let me just check and see if they want to ask a question. So Mrs. Fram's group is joining us from Rochester, Minnesota. They're a 5th grade class. And can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah. Do you guys have a question?
I have a question. We kind of came in late. We had some other things going on in the hallway, but I think we got the gist of it. We don't have to leave for about 20 minutes, so we're good.
Oh, okay.
Ask questions.
All right. I'll swing back. All right, let's jump to, we have a class. Let's see, there we go. Mrs. Reed is joining us from Marathon in Ontario with some high school age students, 9 through 12. Your microphone's on if you guys want to ask a question.
We do have a question for you, Joe.
Wait, so
come on up.
Thanks, Reed. Introduce yourself. Is it off?
Hi, I'm Arya from Marathon. And my question would be, how can youth contribute to the Half Earth Project? Thank you.
Well, first of all, learn as much about it as you can. I'd invite you to go to the website, halfearthproject.org. That's a start. If you connect with us and sign up on our email, you'll learn all kinds of things that are going on. We're about to initiate a campaign where you can take the Half Earth Pledge, and that provides you a list of different things that you can do in your own life there locally to support our goal of getting to half. And the other thing I'd say that's really important is tell all your friends. Help them to understand why this is important and why it's important to you, and then why it should also, of course, be an important part of their lives as well.
All right, great question. Let's jump to Mrs. Langer's class. Mrs. Langer, I'm glad you were able to make it in. They're joining us from Cortice, and they're a grade 4 classroom. And I saw you typed a question, but why don't you go ahead and ask it on microphone. So it should be on now. maybe not. You just muted. Let me turn it on again. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We gotcha.
Okay, Dominic, come on up. So we're having some technical problems because there's a lot of testing. So we're from Curtis, Ontario, Canada. You have to come over here, Dominic.
Hi, Dom.
Okay.
I want to know how many animals are endangered on the planet right now.
How many? Well, we have a pretty good sense of what the species are that are endangered. We keep track of those, at least the ones, the big ones, what we call the charismatic ones, the ones you know about, right? Like lions and tigers and bears. What we don't know, what we imagine, but what we've done is we've only found 2 million of the species that actually live on the earth. There's another 8 million we haven't even discovered yet. So we have a pretty good sense of how many are endangered, but we don't even really have a good catalog of all the ones that are out there. So it's hard to give you a precise answer. But we're doing a pretty good job of saving the ones that we know something about. It's just a very incremental thing. So what we're trying to do with the Half Earth Project is save the habitat that they all need and protect both the ones we know and the ones we don't know. Does that make sense? Maybe your generation can help us discover more species. There's nothing more exciting. And then we'll be able to better care for them as well.
Thank you.
All right, our next classroom, Mrs. Brown's class, is joining us from Frederick in the US, and they're grade 6 and grade 8s. And let me just make sure your microphone's on. All right, go ahead.
I was wondering, how do zoos help Half Earth?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. Zoos are interesting places because they are places that help us to understand animals better, right? In some cases, if there's an animal that's particularly endangered, like we heard the story of Emmy and Eco, those rhinos, we can actually help to restore animals in nature so that through breeding and then repopulating those populations in nature. But that goes both ways too. As we try to learn about and understand animals in zoos, we also, while that supports our caring for them in nature, caring for them in nature also helps us know how to best care for them in zoos. So there are many places that have wonderful, wonderful partnerships to do that. One is actually in Montana. The zoo in Montana has a partnership with the Gorongosa Restoration Project, which I told you about, that's in Mozambique, Africa. And because of that relationship, because of that partnership, they've learned from each other, and it's contributed to the success and restoration of all those animals in Gorongosa National Park. So it's a really important thing, and I appreciate you asking about that. It's a great thing to support and a great way for you to connect with some animals that you may not be able to see in nature.
Absolutely, and we've connected with, actually just last month, a photographer, Bob Poole, who spent a lot of time in Gorongosa and has kind of documented it from the beginning to kind of what it's become now, which is an amazing story. So I highly suggest you look up Bob Poole and see what he's been doing.
Yeah, definitely. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. I know him as well.
Absolutely. All right, let's meet our next classroom. Mrs. Hohen's class, they're joining us from Barrie, Ontario. We've got some grade 2 students, and your microphone is on.
Go ahead, Ethan.
What can we do to save the animals' habitat?
Come here. Big voice.
What can we do to save the animals' habitat?
Did you hear that?
Thank you so much for asking that question. That's a really important question. And you can and should be thinking about that all the time. Now, there are ways in your local government may be looking to create parks or larger areas like that you and your family can support or express your support for. There's ways that there's also parks that may be created on the federal or national level that are part of our national natural heritage that you can work, and you and your parents can work to support. But you can also do it in your own backyard. You know, as you think about your backyard and the various ways that it's supporting the species in your neighborhood, you can think about what's living there. For example, have you seen a lot of butterflies lately? And if you haven't, you can plant certain plants that will attract them into your backyard and create a better habitat for them to thrive. So there's big and little ways that you can do that and connect with that. And I appreciate you asking the question.
It is a good question because you're absolutely right. There are little things we can do even in our own backyard that can make a difference. So that's an awesome point. All right, Mrs. Auber's group, they're joining us from Medina in the United States, and they're grade 4, but they blinked out partway through. So let me see if I turn your mic on. Do you guys have a question about biodiversity or the Half Earth Project?
Yes, we were having some trouble, but I think we're back on now. Go ahead, Grayson.
We read that President Trump's wall may cause more animals to become endangered. Is that true?
Well, what I think you're talking about is that it might keep those animals from migrating in a way that they normally would because they'd be prevented by that wall. And that's something that we have to worry about and think about all the time. Even when we put in new roads, sometimes those roads can be barriers to animals moving and migrating, and therefore being able to find their families and their mates and expand their populations. There's clever ways to manage that by putting underpasses under roads and bridges that allow animals to continue to move in a normal way. But you're right, it'd be really tricky if we have a very solid wall. It may in fact impede some species along the southern border of the US from being able to migrate in ways that they used to.
All right, that's a great question, an excellent point. Their policy can definitely have an impact on what we're trying to do, that's for sure. Our class we visited earlier, Mrs. Fram's group, it looks like they just typed to me that they have a question. So I'm going to turn your mic on and go ahead with your question.
So you're Sophia.
What continent has the most endangered species?
Oh, I don't know if I know the answer to that. There certainly are places that have more biodiversity richness than others. Like the Amazon is super rich with a tremendous amount of biodiversity and also what's called endemism, species that live there that can't live anywhere else in the world. And so they become places that when we cut down forests, when we tear down their environment, they're much more vulnerable to going extinct or being endangered. So those are the places we keep the closest eye on. But the really important thing is the way that all of these species live together, sort of like in a web, and the way they are interdependent. And if you think about it like a Christmas tree, if you pull one light out, it tends to make all the other lights go out. We need to remember to take care of all of the species because they take care of each other and ourselves. And even to remember the little things in the world, like the ants and the spiders and things like that, that provide the real foundation for the rest of species to thrive.
All right, great question, guys. So we'll do one more question. We'll squeeze it in because I can see someone waiting patiently in Mrs. Langer's class up at the camera. So I'm going to turn the mic on and let them have our final question. So your mic's on.
What information lets you know that there's 8 million species that haven't been discovered in the world?
That's such a fantastic question. It has to do with the rate of what we understand about the rate of discovery of species. When we've focused on that discovery, we know that the number of people that have currently been applying themselves to that research tend to discover a certain number of species every year. So if we used all the technology we have and every person on the planet picked a species to discover, that rate of exploration we imagine would get us to about 10 million species total. Thank you for your question. That's a really smart question.
All right. Well, great group of classrooms from Canada and the US and great questions. I definitely think that they're interested in digging a little deeper. So how would they do that? Where should they go to learn more about the Half Earth Project?
They should go to, there's a website called halfearthproject.org. You can go there to learn much more about what we're doing, about all our partners and programs that we're doing to try to bring this goal of Half Earth to life. And we're building out a campaign right now in association with the upcoming Paul Simon concert tour, where you'll be able to also take a Half Earth pledge. And that pledge will then give you things that you can do to support Half Earth in your own lives and in your families and communities.
All right. Well, Paula, thanks so much for joining our celebration. Absolutely thrilled to have the E.O. Wilson Foundation join in, because, I mean, biodiversity and E.O. Wilson, they kind of go hand in hand. So
That's right.
Thank you so much for joining us today during our celebration.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, I'm going to turn the mic on, let the classroom say goodbye and thank you, and we'll sign off for today. So
Okay.
Here come the microphones. Go ahead and say goodbye, guys.
Bye.